Firstly, can I just offer a very, very warm welcome to you all to my constituency here in Stafford. I'm delighted that you've come here, particularly people who've come from a very long way, and for those who've been fighting this battle for many years from down in the southern part of our country. I'm particularly glad that you've come here because, as probably most of you know, the route that is preferred, according to what we learned about 4 months ago, goes within probably 100 yards of here. You're actually almost on the route. It will go through part of the showgrounds. It will also go straight through 5 villages in my constituency, through Great Haywood, through Ingestry, through Hopton, through Marston, and through Yarlett. And you will have probably seen signs, many of you, to Hopton as you came down the road from Weston, if you were coming from the A51. All these other villages are within a few minutes a drive of here, and if you do have a chance afterwards, you might take a drive around to see part of where the preferred route on the second phase is going to go. Clearly, we are here because we do not believe that HS2 is the solution to the very real capacity problems that do exist in some parts of the country, and I'll come on to that in a moment. When I spoke in the House of Commons on Wednesday against the paving bill, I referred to this line as an ultra-high-speed line. There is a misconception, in my view, in the public eye about high-speed rail. We already have relatively high-speed rail in this country. Many of the countries that adopted so-called high-speed rail did so from a position where their main lines were much slower than our existing main lines are. So I always refer to this as ultra-high speed because I'm determined that my colleagues in Parliament should understand that what we're talking about here is not just a little bit of an upgrade to what we have already, but a substantially, a hugely different project, which this country does not need. A country of our size does not need, whereas we do need alternatives which bring capacity up in places like Yorkshire, Buckinghamshire and Bedfordshire, and in some parts of the West Midlands. The debate on Wednesday, in my view, was very significant for 3 reasons. The first was a positive reason. The first was that I believe that the Department for Transport and the Secretary of State and the Minister of State are actually engaging more seriously in the issue of compensation. And I think we will see some moves on that, but we have to press hard, and I know Trevor Forrester is going to speak about this later. So that was positive, that there was a general feeling across the House that compensation needed to be better than what has been provided so far. It needed to be fairer, it needed to be, as I said, very generous. But there were 2 other things which were even more significant. One is that the cost of the line has gone up by £10 billion, just like that, almost without thinking about it. It was introduced in the statement. It hadn't been referred to in the Chancellor's statement earlier that day. An enormous increase in the cost. Now, a lot of this is supposed to be attributable to contingencies, but it's basically in there, and the line is now going to cost, including rolling stock, at least £50 billion. And that's the figure that we all need to use from now on, 50 billion, because until now we've been talking about 32 to 34. It is now 50 billion pounds, or as I sometimes like to say, 50,000 million pounds, because that gives a better idea to people of quite how much this is. Nearly, as I say, 50,000 million pounds. And the final point which came out of this debate on Wednesday was the voting. Now you may say, well, the majority was pretty much 300 in favour of the paving bill, and it was. But the significant thing was how many people didn't vote. What you have is you've got 3 parties who are in favour of it. Interestingly, the Welsh nationalists are against it. You could say that the Scottish nationalists are in favour of it, but the 3 main parties in opposition and in the coalition are in favour of it. They have a total of 617 members of Parliament. Now, the maximum vote in favour was 330. So only 330 members out of 617 who are in the parties which are supposed to be incredibly enthusiastic for HS2 could be bothered to vote for this. Where were the others? Many of them were away, some of them were around and didn't vote. Now, I spoke to some of the 330 who I know who voted in favour, and there is also, in my view, quite a lot of apathy, quite a lot of question marks among those who voted in favour. So what you have in a House of Commons of 650 members of Parliament is 330 who voted in favour on a whipped motion, on a policy which is in, or I would dispute that it's in the manifestos. I wouldn't say that an ultra-high-speed rail is in the manifestos, but anyway, that's what is said. You've got only 330 out of 617 members of Parliament who vote in favour, and then just over 30 who vote against. To me, that gives us a huge opportunity. There are many, many wavering MPs out there. Firstly, the MPs who didn't vote, they are the ones who need, first of all, to try to be persuaded. And then, among those who did vote, but did so, I think, with some degree of reluctance, we need to talk with them, to persuade with them, to engage with them, not shout at them, because shouting never gets anyone anywhere. I know that the people who shout at me the loudest, to some extent, you just switch off. In Parliament, you want to listen to argument, you want to listen, you want to be persuaded. So that brings me on to how can we best persuade another 280 or so MPs when it comes to a hybrid bill later this year or early next year to actually vote against it and put a stop to this whole scheme, because I don't think it's completely beyond the bounds of possibility given those numbers on Wednesday. And there are two ways of doing this. One is to recognise that there are real problems of capacity in parts of the country. Because if we just say there is not a problem, MPs in Yorkshire, MPs in Buckinghamshire, in Bedfordshire, in Northamptonshire will just laugh and say, you don't know what you're talking about. My constituents stand every day on these trains going in and out. They want extra capacity. I'm going to go for extra capacity. The same with Yorkshire MPs whose constituents stand all the way, say, to Doncaster or in Leeds and Sheffield. They will say, look, at certain times of the day, our constituents need that. So we have to provide alternative plans. And I know that alternative plans have been drawn up. I know that they've been dismissed by HS2, but my interactions with HS2, the more I interact with them, the less I'm impressed with them. And I think you've probably, I'm learning what many of you have known for 2 or 3 years, but I'm just learning it. Just to give you one example, I don't know if you know, but I mentioned this in the Commons on Wednesday. I wrote to HS2 and asked them about their business case and how they determined it. And they said to me that 70% of the travellers on HS2 would be leisure travellers. Now, to me, I thought this was a railway which was designed primarily for business travel, which I could understand, and primarily for premium business travel. But if it's for leisure travellers, A, don't need ultra-high-speed trains, and B, are very discerning when it comes to price. So how are you going to be able to make it pay when 70% of your travellers are going to be people perhaps using rail cards, are going to be people who are very discerning on price, who will book well in advance and try and get the cheapest possible prices? I don't know. I think this was quite a surprise to many people who thought that the biggest business case on HS2 depended upon it being largely a business railway. So we have to provide valid alternatives for those MPs, particularly the ones in Yorkshire, Buckinghamshire, Northamptonshire, Bedfordshire, who are really concerned about capacity, and indeed the ones around Birmingham. And secondly, we just need to keep on about affordability. We need to stress the figure of £50,000 million, which will probably go up. And don't forget, that's in today's prices. So in cash terms, it will probably go up every year. Those, I believe, are the two constructive ways in which we can do. There are many other, I would say, subsidiary reasons that we can give, but let's continue and I congratulate all the people who've done this for 3-4 years now. We've only really just come on the scene here in terms of that, and we're building on all that tremendous work that you've all done. But we've got to put over this argument time and time again to members of Parliament who ultimately are going to make this decision that this railway is not the solution to the real problems that some people have, and it is also far too expensive.